Today's episode of Off the Timeline is titled Texas Tech Built the League That Replaced Texas. On a windy October night in 1973 in Lubbock, Texas, something happened that wasn't supposed to matter. No blue bloods were on the field, no traditional power conference logos were on the screen, and most of the country didn't know what it was even watching. But by the end of the fourth quarter, everyone watching understood one thing. Texas Tech wasn't playing gimmick football, they were playing future football. And in this alternate history, that night didn't just change a game, it changed which schools controlled college football for the next 50 years. Because what if Texas Tech didn't survive realignment? What if Texas Tech solved it? And that sets the table to the problem with waiting. College football likes to pretend that power is inherited. That is, if you're Texas or Notre Dame or Alabama, the future will eventually bend your way. But the truth is, power only lasts as long as permission does. In the 1950s, Texas Tech had a problem that history tends to gloss over. They were winning, they were growing, and they were being politely told to wait. Wait for the Southwest Conference to decide they were ready. Wait for Texas to say yes. Wait for Baylor and SMU to feel comfortable. And Tech's leadership realized something uncomfortable in this what-if scenario. Waiting wasn't neutral. Waiting was a decision, and it was a losing one. So instead of asking to be included, Texas Tech did something radical. They stopped asking. Now, before anyone jumps to the comments to say Tech wasn't powerful enough to do this, remember this is alternate history, not fantasy. Every move that follows is grounded in incentives that already existed. And that's how the High Plains Alliance was born. And that sets the table for the league that was not supposed to work. The High Plains Alliance, the HPA, wasn't flashy. It did not have Texas, nor did it have national prestige, and it did not promise dominance. What it promised was something far more dangerous. Stability without permission. Texas Tech anchors the league. SMU and TCU defect early, chasing math instead of nostalgia. Programs like New Mexico and UTEP fill geographic gaps. And critics say the same thing they always say. This isn't real football. This will collapse. This can't last without Texas. That's the most common objection in this universe, and it's wrong. Because the HPA did something no one else was doing at the time. It separated governance from prestige. No single school controlled veto power. No brand dictated scheduling. Revenue mattered more than ego. And while the Southwest Conference argued about hierarchy, the HPA quickly experimented. Tempo, spacing, and passing on early downs. Which brings us back to that night in 1973. And that sets the table for the night that locked the legacy. Texas Tech versus SMU. Both undefeated. National TV. SMU plays the game everyone expects. Texas Tech does not. They spread the field wider than anyone is comfortable with. They throw on first down. They force defenders into space they've never had to defend. Late fourth quarter. Tie game. Tech checks at the line. The crowd is deafening. Snap. Crossing route. Clear out. Safety hesitates. Touchdown. Not a trick. Not luck. Just design. And the broadcast crew says the line that changes everything. Texas Tech is playing tomorrow's football. That moment matters because it answers something else you may be asking. This league only worked because of one lucky game. No, that game worked because the league allowed it to exist. That's the difference. And that sets the table for Texas misreading the board. Here's where the story gets uncomfortable for Texas. Texas sees the HPA, they see Tech rising, and they don't panic. They dismiss it. They assume prestige will win, that gravity always pulls inward. And when SMU and TCU leave the Southwest Conference, Texas does not react, because reacting would legitimize the HPA. Instead, Texas delays, which leads to the most important mistake Texas makes in this alternate history. Texas confuses leverage with permanence. Because while Texas waits, Texas A&M moves quietly, deliberately, and without Texas. And the moment Texas realizes A&M has negotiated an SEC path without them, something falls into place. Not anger, but fear of being second. And that sets the table for the rush that costs Texas leverage. Texas does what it almost never does, it rushes. They reopen SEC talks with urgency. They assume concessions will be automatic. They overplay brand power in a market where sequence now matters more than size. And this may be where you may be asking yourself, Texas would never lose leverage. Except they do, because the SEC understands something Texas doesn't yet. Texas Tech already proved that leagues can survive without Texas. That changes everything. The SEC doesn't need Texas to save them. Texas needs the SEC to avoid being last. And for the first time, Texas enters a league on terms they do not control. And that sets the table for what happened to the HPA. This is where people usually assume collapse. And in this universe, that assumption is wrong. The HPA doesn't dissolve, it evolves. By the early 90s, with Texas and Texas A&M going national, the HPA negotiates from strength. It merges upward into a new league, the Continental Plains Conference. Not built around Texas, but built around lessons. Shared governance, no single brand veto. Late window value, innovation over nostalgia. And this may be where you may be asking yourself, without Texas, this league would dissolve. No, without Texas, this league finally stabilizes. The Southwest Conference, meanwhile, dissolves quietly in 1992, not in scandal, but in irrelevance. No shared future, no agreement on purpose, just an ending. And that sets the table to where they are now. So where does this leave everyone by 2025 in this alternate history? Texas Tech is not a blue blood. There's something even rarer, a founder power. The school that taught college football how to survive itself. Texas remains powerful, but they're no longer inevitable. Texas A&M secures identity before dominance, and the Continental Plains Conference, it never wins every headline, but it never panics. Which leads to something else you might be asking yourself. This feels too clean. But that's the point. Realignment doesn't always end up as chaotic drama. It drifts until drift becomes destiny. Now, college football didn't change because Texas fell in leverage. It changed because Texas Tech stopped waiting. And in this alternate history, the most dangerous schools were not the loudest ones. They were the ones who realized first that permission was the real currency. And if you enjoy this kind of deep, inevitable realignment storytelling, like the video, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which school you want to pressure test next. Because once you see college football this way, you cannot unsee it.